Okay, so maybe we should just get started. Yeah? Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the Radical Networks opening. It's so great that so many people are here. Yes, thank you. Yay. Yeah, we also, so Radical Networks is myself, Sarah, and Erica, originally from the States, obviously. I'm living here in Berlin now. Erica came from New York to be here. We want to thank Lika and Spektrum for hosting us, and also Benjamin, the Spektrum intern, who's done a lot for us, so thank you very much. We also want to, of course, thank all of the participants who came from all over the place to come share their work and their energy and their efforts for coming here. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Also, thanks to Ryan Taylor for providing the live stream. And also thanks to Bjork, Fanny, Laura, and all the volunteers for helping us set up today, and they'll also be helping us through the weekend as we run Radical Networks. So a few announcements. So for tonight and also tomorrow and Sunday, while we do the talks, we ask that you try to stay off the network because we have some bandwidth issues and we really need as much bandwidth as possible for the live stream and also for the performance tonight. So please try to limit your data consumption on the Wi-Fi. Also be aware that we do have a live stream running, so if you don't want your face to appear on YouTube, don't turn around or just be aware of the video there. And we as well have a photographer. I should as well obviously thank our photographer, Feline. She's right there. If you don't want to be photographed, let her know, please. We'll be respectful of that. Excuse me while I look at my notes. Oh yeah, we also have some tote bags for sale up front if you want one, and some pins, and we have stickers for free scattered on the bar and also up front. We also have some books for sale by Constant, so check that out too. That's also up front. I just will introduce what's in the gallery real fast. We have several pieces. One is by Grayson Earl Bailblock, and he'll be presenting that tonight. Also by Adnan Hadzi and Natasha Sterney. We have the Boat TR project, and as well there's a Wi-Fi network. You'll see Boat TR, so you can join that network to experience the piece or to learn more about the piece. As well, we have by Caroline Sinders and Manny Nilciani, Dark Patterns and Immersive Story Probing Surveillance as a VR experience in the back corner. Ribbon has a monitor set up with offshore tour operator, which is also, hello, Kevin. Kevin's back there. He also ran a workshop today related to that, so go check that out up there. Scott Fitzgerald brought MacCheck. Scott, we have a collection of routers causing a minor infestation on the wall just around the corner here. They're very cute. If it's okay, I describe your work as that. Okay. On the main monitor, facing the street is Network from Memory by Gary Ng. And finally, we have by Chelsea Thompto, who's our first speaker up, a Transmaterial Body, Envisioning Trans Embodiment Beyond the Traditional Limits of the Corporeal. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chelsea up front, and please give her a hand. Thank you.
Thanks. Just take 1 second here. Hello, I'm Chelsea Thompto, like they just said. Before I get started, I want to say thank you to Sarah and Erica for having me here. I really appreciate it. So tonight I'm going to be talking to you all about a new piece that I've been working on called A Transmaterial Body. Basically, What this piece is a durational performance involving my body in a local intranet wireless network. The network is battery powered and is carried on myself at all times. You can see it here. It's running on this little Raspberry Pi Zero. Throughout the event, it'll actually just be on my belt. As such, the network and myself are constantly centered on and overlapping one another. Before I get too far into the rest of the piece, I wanted to give you all a little bit of an overview about my other work that I've done leading up to this point. So I'm going to show you some previous work, mostly from around a year and a half ago up until now. So my work, visual artwork, is based mostly off of two main ideas. The first being systems, that is visual systems, taxonomical systems, political systems, oppressive systems, and expressive systems. By this, I'm mostly focusing on the United States and my experience living in the United States, both as a trans person and just as a citizen. I've observed the way that systems, especially colonial systems, really shape a lot of the ways that we understand the world around us. Visual systems that I'm interested in looking at are visual cues, especially of gender and the way that I am read throughout my life. Taxonomical systems with regard to the way that we categorize and recategorize and make smaller and smaller categories. Political, I'm really interested in the way that trans identity has been swept up and made into a political issue and made consumable by the sort of political machine in the United States, and the way that has led to oppressive systems of governing, especially with regard to bathroom bills in the United States. And one of the things I'm most interested in is how systems are expressive, and especially expressive of things that they are not necessarily wanting to be expressive of. So what is it when we observe a system that we can learn about that system based on who are they letting out, who are they letting in, and what can we learn about them that perhaps they don't want us to learn? The second main thing that I'm interested in is, like I've already mentioned, trans. So in this case, I'm interested in gender identity, my own gender identity, and thinking about transgender identity as an embodied experience. And by that, I mean thinking about the way that I move through the world as necessarily changed, fundamentally changed by my experience of transitioning gender. So the way I experience a bathroom, the way I experience intimacy, the way I experience speaking to people in classroom settings, in work settings, and how my moving through the world as a trans person has highlighted all of these ways that we subtly gender even the most innocuous of social experiences. And then secondly, gender, or trans as both gesture and tactic. In this, I'm thinking about the term doubly trans. This is a term that was coined by Suzanne Stryker in 2008, and it basically refers to work, whether that is scholarly work or artistic work, that is both trans in the way that it talks about transgender identity, and also trans as a gesture or a tactic to imagine a way of thinking about a material or thinking about a subject in a trans manner. And by this, I generally mean the prefixal trans being used to talk about things being across, beyond, and through. So with those two ideas in mind, some of my previous work that has built up to this project based on systems and trans identity. The first piece, this is called The Best Trans Woman, and it was created in 2017. In this piece, a military opaque image projector, which generally projects an image out onto the wall, has been inverted, and a screen has been placed on the inside of it so that the viewer has to walk closer to the machine in order to actually see the video. And the phrase, "the best trans woman is an invisible one," is repeated over and over in my voice as I'm also caressing/constricting my throat. So in this piece, I'm thinking about the ways in which trans women have been accepted in the United States, and specifically the fact that the more you pass for a heteronormative white trans person, the more likely you are to be safe moving through the world, and how that articulates a system wherein we're not actually accepting trans people, we're accepting people who reaffirm and reify our ideas of what gender should be. Next, read. These two, the last piece and this piece, have been shown together predominantly. In this piece, there's a slow scanning of my body that matriculates mostly around the outside and around joints, while avoiding areas that we classically use to identify gender and sex. The piece is projected through a two-way mirror, so what you're actually seeing is one image that is passing both through a mirror and being reflected off of that mirror. I'm thinking about the ways that privacy and security technologies can actually do the reverse of that for marginalized populations. Next, I did an installation earlier this year titled Sight, 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 using this homonym to think about trans bodies as both sight as in spectacle, sight as in citation, and sight as in location. A location of really intensely political debate and conversation. So what you see in the very front on this table is a book that is non-linear in nature and has no text. There are macro photographs of my body, and the entire book is coated in a very soft wax so that anytime a viewer holds on to the book, they're actually leaving their mark. And this idea of a viewer being implicated in the piece is something I'm really interested in and shows back up in the Transmaterial Body piece, which I'm talking about today. Behind that is a generative text piece that I've created using 54 different snippets of text about trans bodies, everything from correspondences, electronic correspondences with my doctor, to Facebook posts, to news articles, and every minute those are shuffled through and 3 more are populated on the screen so that you get this constant juxtaposition of these different voices that are all speaking about this same issue. Behind those 2 walls that you just saw was a large projection. This large projection was a randomly generated sequence of videos that I created so that the viewer could stand in front of the screen for as long as they wanted and never truly know whether or not they saw every piece. These videos were also exploring this similar idea of systems of visualization and politicalization. Some of them were like this. Image is from a screen capture of a computer. Some of them were studio shot photographs. So this all brings me back to this piece. This is a much nicer, bigger photograph of what I have going on up here. And basically, from a technical standpoint, and as a side note, I'm happy to talk way more in depth about this if you'd like, but here I'm going to be pretty cursory about the technical details. So the hardware of this piece is a Raspberry Pi Zero, and it's connected to a Pimarini Enviro P-hat, which is plugs into all of the pins on the top, and this contains both analog input to digital and some sensors of its own. And it's also connected to an external wireless card and a heart rate sensor. For software, I've used the Raspbian OS, Python, using the P-hat's own proprietary library, Node.js with Socket.io, No-Dog Splash for a captive portal screen, DNS mask, and LightTPD. There are others I'm sure I'm failing to mention. So basically, what happens when you view this work, viewers who connect to this network will find their devices, web browsers, redirecting them to a web page accessible to them only while in range of the network. This page features my picture and will instruct them to come and speak with me in order to gain further access to the network. So this whole piece and the entire network operates on an exchange. So in order to gain access, viewers will be prompted to come and speak with me and offer some piece of their own personal data. I use the term data, but I construe that very broadly, allowing viewers to sort of tell me what they think personal data means. and allowing them to define what that sort of currency is for them. In exchange, they gain access to web pages that contain live stream biological data. So right now, this piece that is connected to my ear is outputting my heart rate by reading it through my earlobe, and it's putting it out live stream on the website, and that is being projected out. And an interaction log, so for those people who do come and talk to me, I will be anonymizing what they tell me, but what they tell me will be put in a text file log. And technical information about the piece and other media are also available. So the Raspberry Pi Zero here is running 3 servers. It's running one for the captive login, one to deal with all of the live streaming of data, and then another to serve all of the more static content. So in general, what I think about when I'm thinking about this piece is problematizing a few different subjects. First, the limits of the body. I'm thinking a lot about the gesture of trans here, like I talked about earlier. The gesture of trans as a way to complicate what we see as the limits. And one of the things I'm really interested in this conversation is the language that surrounds the way we connect to networks, right? Whether we see a wireless network on our phone, whether it's showing up, whether we've connected to it, whether we have access, whether we're in range. And what happens when you start applying those terms to a network that is also connected to a body. In that way, this idea of local digital spaces becomes more invigorated. So at least in the United States, my experience with local digital space is that it is primarily used for things like Instagram and Snapchat. And the idea of an intranet network rather than the internet is not really something that's explored as a radical space for other kinds of digital intimacy or digital connection. And so in this way, I'm thinking about how we could use a site-specific digital network to connect people in new ways, which are really, in fact, old ways, but to re-enliven a local digital space and get that space to become something other than driven from larger corporate ideas of what the internet is and what social media and connection is, and to think about intimacy in a digital sense in a new way. So by digital intimacy here, I'm thinking about the way in which you connect to this network via your phone or via your computer, but then you're prompted to come and talk to me in person. And this becomes, in a way, its own social network, but in a way that doesn't rely on accruing data from you, using that data to sell things to you, and doesn't have a life beyond that interaction and the network itself. And I think that this is a really interesting way to sort of invert the process that we normally understand to be involved with sharing ourselves online or on a digital network. So what happens if, this project gets multiplied and other people have these networks, and it's a different way for you to connect with a person, to understand the people around you, to understand the space around you as digital but enlivened in this really culturally and locally specific sort of way. And then finally, connection and disconnection as a dichotomy. So one of the things about this network is that it is an intranet versus an internet. So when connecting to it, you're also disconnecting from the internet at large. And I find this really interesting because in one sense, you are disconnecting from this broader knowledge, but you're connecting to a very specific knowledge. And we usually think about internet as either having it or not having it, being connected or not being connected. In this way, this becomes a two-way street where you are disconnecting and reconnecting in a way that complicates whether or not an on and off is actually possible. So the SSID for the network is my name, Chelsea Thompto. I'm going to be performing the piece throughout the conference here, the rest of this evening, tomorrow, and the next day. I really hope that any of you who are interested will connect to the network and come and speak with me. And I'm really happy now to take any questions that you might have, either regarding the technical or any other conceptual ideas that you want to talk about the piece. So, thank you very much. Yeah.
What's the distinction between those two, or how do you see that distinction?
That's a really good question. I'll go back to that slide.
Sorry, Chelsea, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So he wanted to know what the distinction was between political and oppressive. And I think that in some ways oppressive is just broader, right? One of the really interesting trends that I've noticed in US politics is when I talk about trans being swept up in a political conversation, it gets swept up on both sides, both the left and the right. And while largely the narrative on the left is that trans people should be accepted and that trans rights are human rights and etc. There are still really problematic ways in which trans people are characterized and made palatable for the larger Democratic Party, for example. So in a political sense, I think that that intersects not only with the oppressive and the expressive, but also the visual, right? And politics of respectability. And in the way that not only do political systems that think of themselves as being pro a certain population, they are also making that population for themselves and making it legible and tasteful to the other parts of their base, if that makes sense. So I think that could be a place where that distinction might lie, but there's definitely a lot of overlap for sure. Yeah. Yes.
How long have you been doing the piece with the access point that you see you do?
So this is the premiere of the piece tonight, yeah. So I've only tested it out with a couple other people back in Wisconsin where I traveled here from. So I know that the piece works, but I haven't had a lot of interaction with it, yeah. So this is really the premiere of it.
I was going to ask if you've had any interesting kind of encounters or conversations from it yet, but I guess...
I will say that the one person that I have talked to about it and who has given me a piece of their personal data told me something I never really thought that they would have, you know, freely given up before. So I'm really excited to have more, though. Yeah. Yes.
I didn't really get what you were then doing with that information.
So mostly it is just transactional. So you give that to me, and then you get access to this personal data that's being live streamed. There will also be an interaction log, which is literally just a text file, where I will say, on this day, I spoke with someone, we were at this place, and they gave me this information. It's not going to be specific enough to be able to go back to one person. I'm not even going to necessarily ask you for your name. Whatever information you give me is the sort of, information that will be on there. But it's really, to me, that information really is what consists of and makes this digital intimate space. So I'm not really worried about making sure that it is tracked in some specific way, if that helps.
In the intranet as well, you're loading it into
Yes, yeah. So it'll be hosted on here, and other people will be able to see it. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Are you going to be keeping track of the, not necessarily the individuals, but the number of times that people access the information on your personal intranet after having an interaction with them?
Yeah, so right now the piece, I am able to track to see how many people are currently connected. It's not necessarily something that I'm actively going to be visualizing on the intranet, but I am interested both for performance reasons, how many people can I actually handle on the network, and also to see, after I've talked with people, you basically have to put in a password on the splash screen, and what will be really interesting to me is if someone talks to me tonight, on Sunday, if they're still in the same area, are they logging back on, and are they, because the password isn't going to expire the entire time. So you talk to me once and you have access to that information for the rest of the time here. So, yeah. Yes?
Yeah. Is there a documentation, technical documentation somewhere, and what is the license of the work?
Yeah, so I am working on making a GitHub fork of all of this. One of the things that is on the intranet is all of the source code and all of the configuration files for the different softwares that I've used. The Python code for the EnviroHat, which is what's running the analog input and also the ambient temperature sensor, is proprietary to the developers, right? You have to actually have that piece of hardware for it to be useful, but the way that I've used it is also documented on there. The end goal is that that will be hosted as well on my intranet website, not just intranet website, and that it will be more holistic documentation once I make sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Is this an exploration into the idea of more than, so for yourself, more than just one person having a personal intranet? Is this kind of like an exploration of like what if other people had their own personal intranet?
Yeah, so the question is this an exploration of just me having my own personal intranet, or the idea of a lot of people having their own personal intranets and what that would look like? To start with, you know, the easiest way for me to imagine this kind of crazy concept is to do it myself and to do it for myself. But part of the idea of actually putting out all of the code that I've used to the public would be to encourage other people to do the same thing. I would very much consider myself amateur in the world of code, so a lot of people will probably look at it and then immediately wince from seeing how bad it is, right, and how maybe inelegant some of my solutions have been. But yeah, the idea is that, you know, perhaps at some point this piece could be part of a mesh network, or that you would be able to implement this in other ways. This is actually a Raspberry Pi Zero W, so there are 2 wireless cards on here. For now, I'm using the one that's on board just for debugging on my home network because it's easier to access. But the idea is that maybe at some point, if I convince other people to run similar things, that we could figure out how to connect it and make a network of these in a local area. Yeah. Anyone else? Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone.